ever feel like you're stuck in a food rut, like chicken nugget skin?
Yeah.
Now imagine that feeling magnified like 100 times. That's often what dinner time feels like for autistic children and their families. Today, we are diving deep into picky eating and autism, but not the usual just one bite lecture.
Right.
This is about getting inside their world and finding surprisingly creative solutions.
It's fascinating because so much of what we traditionally do is about getting kids to eat what we want, when the real breakthrough comes from understanding why they are reacting this way.
It's like we're stuck on eat your veggies when there's a whole universe of sensory experience happening for them.
Precisely. Take the idea of giving kids complete control over their food choices.
Oh, okay.
Now I know what you're thinking.
Oh,
Won't they just live on cookies?
yeah.
But stick with me. There's this amazing approach called the buffet method that turns this idea on its head.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this buffet method. Does it involve tiny shrimp forks and a chocolate fountain? Asking for a friend?
Not quite. Though a little chocolate fountain never hurt anyone.
Right.
It's more about setting out a spread of healthy options,
Okay.
like a mini buffet,
Okay.
and letting the child choose what and how much they want.
Oh, so no pressure, no battles, just free-range grazing.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that this ties into the theory of autonomy. You see, when kids feel in control, they're actually more open to trying new things. It's like choosing your own adventure book. You're way more invested when you're the one calling the shots.
That makes so much sense. It takes the pressure off and turns mealtime into a fun exploration.
Exactly. And the results can be surprising. There's this great story from the Be Change Center for Autism training program about a child who was known for having an incredibly limited food repertoire.
Oh, wow.
Their parents tried everything to get them to try new things, but nothing seemed to work. Then they tried this buffet method, and guess what? This child, who had never shown any interest in fruit before, started arranging different kinds of fruit into funny faces on their plate, and eventually started tasting them.
Wow. That's a real light bulb moment. It's like the act of choosing for themselves on their own terms made all the difference.
It really highlights how powerful it can be to shift our perspective from make them eat this to create an environment where they feel safe and empowered to explore.
And speaking of exploration, I love this idea of approaching mealtime as a sensory art experience. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Absolutely. Because for many autistic children, food isn't just about taste. It's a full-on sensory symphony.
Yeah.
Texture, smell, color,
Yeah.
all of it.
And sometimes that symphony can be a little overwhelming, right?
Exactly. So instead of focusing solely on eating, what if we encourage interaction and play with food? It's like sensory art with edible materials.
Okay, now we're talking my language. So instead of stressing over empty plates, we're building veggie towers, painting with sauces, making broccoli forests.
You got it.
Yeah.
This approach can be incredibly helpful for autistic children, especially those who might have sensory processing differences. By allowing them to engage with food on a tactile and visual level first, we're helping them build positive associations without the pressure of actually eating it.
It reminds me of this story from the training material about a parent whose child refused all fruits.
Right.
Completely. But then they started letting their child play with sliced strawberries and bananas, making faces and designs, and eventually the kids started tasting and enjoying them. It's amazing how that playful interaction can lead to such a big change.
It really is. By shifting the focus from consumption to exploration, we're creating a safe and fun environment for children to engage with food on their own terms. And sometimes that's all it takes to spark that curiosity and open them up to trying new things.
It's like sneaking in the fun and learning without them even realizing it. And speaking of fun, how about we inject a little futuristic flair into this whole mealtime adventure?
Okay, I'm listening.
Get ready for this.
Virtual reality.
Now that's thinking outside the lunchbox.
Right.
Yeah.
We've seen VR used for things like social skills training in autistic children. But imagine a VR experience where kids go on culinary quests, trying different foods in a virtual world to unlock new levels or superpowers.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that. There's actually already real-world evidence to support this idea. One study used a VR app to help autistic children practice trying new foods in a simulated environment before encountering them in real life.
Wow.
The results were impressive. Reduced anxiety around new foods and increased engagement during actual meals.
Okay, that's seriously cool. It's like their brains are getting a test run in this safe virtual space, which then translates into more confidence in the real world. It's like training wheels for your taste buds. Exactly.
Hmm.
VR allows for repeated exposure to new foods in a controlled environment, which can be incredibly beneficial for children with sensory sensitivities.
Hmm.
It's about taking the fear and anxiety out of the equation and replacing it with curiosity and fun.
It's like turning mealtime into a video game.
In a way, yes. And who knows what other technological advances the future holds. Maybe one day we'll have virtual taste testers.
But in the meantime, let's talk about another fascinating avenue: neurofeedback and biofeedback.
Okay, this sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. We're talking about actually seeing a child's brain activity during meals. Tell me more. We're back to our deep dives into picky eating in autistic children, and wow, are we venturing into some fascinating territory.
Right.
Last time, we were just on the verge of unraveling the secrets of neurofeedback and biofeedback.
Right.
It's like we're stepping into a sci-fi movie where we can actually see what's happening in the brain during mealtime.
It's true. These technologies are really giving us a glimpse into the inner workings of the brain and how it responds to sensory experiences.
Including, of course, the wonderful world of food.
Okay, so for our listeners who might not have encountered neurofeedback and biofeedback before, can you give us a quick explanation of what they actually are?
Absolutely. Imagine being able to see your child's brain activity in real time as they interact with food.
Okay.
That's essentially what neurofeedback allows us to do.
Yeah.
It uses sensors to monitor brainwaves, giving us a window into how the brain is responding to different stimuli, like the taste, texture, and smell of food.
So we're not just guessing anymore, we're actually seeing what's happening in the brain as they experience food.
Exactly. It's like having a direct line to their sensory experience.
Mm-hmm.
Biofeedback takes a similar approach,
Okay.
but focuses on the body's physiological responses. So we're looking at things like heart rate, muscle tension, even sweat gland activity,
Wow.
all of which can provide clues about how the body is reacting to food.
That's incredible. It's like having a whole dashboard of information to help us understand why a child might be averse to certain foods.
Precisely. And here's where it gets really interesting for picky eaters. By understanding these physiological and neurological responses,
Yeah.
we can start to pinpoint specific triggers. For example, a child might have an exaggerated fear response to the smell of a certain food, or their heart rate might spike when presented with a plate of mixed textures.
Right.
Neurofeedback and biofeedback can help us identify these triggers with much more accuracy.
It's like we're finally starting to understand the language of their senses.
Yes.
We're not just dismissing them as being difficult, we're actually listening to what their bodies are trying to tell us.
Exactly. And once we have that understanding, we can start to develop personalized strategies to help children regulate their responses.
Right.
It's not about fixing the child. It's about empowering them with the tools to manage their own sensory experiences.
It reminds me a bit of that idea we talked about earlier about giving kids control and autonomy over their food choices.
Right.
This seems like another way of doing that, but on a whole other level.
You're exactly right. It's about giving them a sense of agency and control over their own sensory experiences.
Right.
And there's so many different ways we can do that. For example, there's a technique called sensory integration therapy that's often used with autistic children.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It involves activities designed to help regulate the sensory system.
I've heard of that. Like using weighted blankets or swinging to help kids process sensory input.
Exactly. And the fascinating thing is that biofeedback can actually be used in conjunction with these therapies
Okay.
to track progress and personalize the approach. It's like giving therapists a real-time feedback loop to see what's working and what's not.
So it's not just about throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. We're getting much more targeted and individualized in our approach.
Exactly. And while these technologies are still relatively new in the context of picky eating, the early results are very promising.
Hmm.
There was a pilot study done where biofeedback was used to help parents tailor food presentation to minimize their autistic children's stress reactions during meals.
Oh, that's right. I read about that in the training material from the Be Change Center for Autism. The researchers found that even small adjustments, like separating foods by texture, adjusting the lighting, or using specific utensils, could make a huge difference.
It just goes to show how important it is to approach each child as an individual.
Yeah.
What works for one child might not work for another, and these technologies allow us to be much more precise in our interventions.
It really highlights the power of personalized medicine and how it's changing the way we address all sorts of challenges, including something as seemingly straightforward as picky eating.
It's true. And while these high-tech solutions are incredibly exciting, it's important to remember that they're just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
The most effective approach always involves a combination of strategies tailored to the individual child's needs and preferences.
It's about using all the tools in our toolbox, both high-tech and low-tech,
Right?
to create a mealtime experience that is enjoyable and nourishing for everyone involved.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's about finding that sweet spot where science meets compassion,
Yeah.
where we're using the latest technology to create more humane and effective interventions.
And speaking of compassion, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about a completely different, and some might say unconventional approach. The power of storytelling and even hypnosis.
Okay.
Might seem like a bit of a leap from brainwaves and sensors, but trust me, it's fascinating stuff. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're exploring the intricate world of picky eating in autistic children.
Right.
And just when you thought we'd exhausted all the cutting-edge tech, we're taking a sharp turn from brainwaves and sensors into the realm of imagination and storytelling.
Yeah, it might seem like we're switching gears entirely,
Right.
but stick with us. There's a fascinating connection here.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about the power of the subconscious mind? How it can influence our behaviors and beliefs in ways we might not even realize?
Absolutely. It's like that saying, the mind is like an iceberg. Most of it is hidden underwater.
Exactly. And when it comes to picky eating, there might be subconscious fears, anxieties, or negative associations with food lurking beneath the surface, influencing a child's reactions without them even knowing it.
So how do we access that hidden part of the iceberg, that subconscious realm, and rewire those negative associations?
That's where storytelling and hypnosis come into play.
Okay.
Picture this. A child, tucked in for bed, listening to a captivating story about a brave knight who gains extraordinary strength from eating a magical fruit.
Okay, I'm already hooked. It's like planting positive seeds in their subconscious.
Precisely. The story, repeated over time, starts to weave these positive associations with trying new foods. Courage, strength, adventure. It's all happening beneath the surface, subtly shifting their perspective without them even realizing it.
It's like subliminal messaging for picky eaters.
In a way, yes. And the fascinating thing is, therapists have been using similar techniques for years to help people overcome phobias and anxieties. It's about tapping into the power of suggestion and imagination to create positive change.
So it's not as far-fetched as it might sound.
Yes.
It's about harnessing the power of stories, something we've been doing as humans for centuries to help children develop a healthier relationship with food.
Exactly. And while more research is needed in the context of picky eating specifically,
Yeah.
the potential here is enormous.
Right.
But whether we're talking about storytelling, sensory play, high-tech interventions, or a combination of all these things,
Right.
the most crucial aspect is meeting each child where they are.
That's such a vital reminder. There's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
Right.
Every child is unique, every family is unique, and what works for one might not work for another.
Exactly. It's about being flexible, adaptable, and most importantly, patient and understanding throughout the process.
Right.
It's about working collaboratively with families and caregivers to find the approaches that resonate most with each individual child.
Because ultimately, it's not just about getting food into their stomachs, right? It's about nurturing a positive and healthy relationship with food that will last them a lifetime.
Beautifully said. And remember, every bite, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction.
And on that note, dear listeners, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the fascinating and multifaceted world of picky eating in autistic children. We've journeyed from playful sensory adventures to the frontiers of neuroscience and even ventured into the boundless realm of imagination.
It's true.
We've explored a diverse menu of approaches, from high-tech solutions to the timeless power of storytelling, all with the goal of empowering families and caregivers to create more positive and enjoyable mealtime experiences.
Absolutely.
Remember, there's no magic bullet, but with empathy, creativity, and a willingness to think outside the lunchbox, you can help your little ones develop a healthier and happier relationship with food.
That's true.
From all of us here at the Deep Dive, happy exploring.